I'm Angie Berkey, and this is What She Said, a podcast about the things women talk about when we're finally telling the truth. Let's get into it. Welcome back to What She Said. I am so excited for today's conversation because I get to have one of my favorite people in the world with me in the studio. Today, I have my friend Amanda Law joining us. Amanda has been one of my closest friends for the last 30 years, and we actually met much earlier than that when we were young girls attending summer camp in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. And we reconnected all those years later in college. And since that time, we have journeyed together as soul sisters through the ups and downs of life, as it were. Lots of ups, lots of downs, and lots of in-betweens. So Amanda, say hello.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast. I feel honored because I've only been on one podcast before, and that was one of yours. So
It's another one of mine.
Surprise, here I am.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm happy to be here and just have the person I can talk to forever, the most in my entire life, where people are like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, Angie. And they'll be like, okay, we'll come get you in 4 hours.
That reminds me so much of when we were pregnant with Xavier and Phoebe, and we would get together on Friday nights after a long week. We'd get on the phone and talk for just a long time because we were going through the exact same thing and they were born days apart.
Yes. And we actually have to schedule phone dates because we don't live by each other, but we try to see each other as often as we can make schedules work in person. And when we do, we just know it's going to be several days of us just talking nonstop. So we'll see what comes up today. There's a lot of different things that we could be discussing today. I have 2 children that are young women, one that's going to be a junior in college and one that's going to be a senior. And I'm soon facing being an empty nester, which is a topic of much discussion we've had. I work as a nurse practitioner, and I specialize in pulmonary and sleep, and my background's always been in critical care. I'm also working on my doctorate, which is a new project for me now that I have time because my kids are older.
Lovely. Well, yeah, as you said, I feel like this conversation could go in myriad different directions because we have had so much experience together over the course of our life and friendship together. And friendship is one of the things that I am most interested in talking about, female friendships, right, on this show, because they enrich our lives so deeply. They impact us so much. And much like everything else in life, there are seasons and there are ups and there are downs. And I think our friendship is one that has just been so beautiful because we've never really had a period of time when we've had any falling out or anything like that. Of course, there are periods of time where life gets busier, we have more or less time for one another, or able to see each other more frequently. But I think one of the things that stands out to me is we have just seemed to have regular intervals of really difficult things that have come up in one or both of our lives where we have needed one another.
Oh, that's not normal?
Yeah, totally normal. But at the same time, I think in my first episode, I was talking a bit about my journey to recognizing and realizing how important the women in my life are to me. And you are one of those women who has shown up at every turn when I've had really difficult moments. And I was recalling for the listeners a time when I was going through my first divorce, and you just kept showing up for me in really beautiful ways. You had come out here to Denver to visit me at one point when I basically could barely get out of bed and get off the floor, and scraped me up, and we went and got tattoos and did some other fun things that time. But I remember coming to your house and we kind of burned some things as a little bit of a ritual to help me move past some of the pain that I was feeling. But then you've had some journeys through some pretty difficult things, and I know those times also have brought us very close together as well. Do you feel like or care to share a little bit about some of the health journeys that you've been on over the last 15-ish years?
Yes, absolutely. So I will say when I'm talking about you, Angie, I always talk about, I'm going to get tearful because I always do when I bring it up. But when I had a brain tumor, which I'll be talking about, but I had a recurrence of that. Angie didn't hesitate. She just jumped in a car and drove out to see me like the same day or the next day.
I couldn't not.
I know. It just strikes me so hard. It's like the pull we have to each other and how much we support each other. I will never forget that. Anyway, okay. I am somebody that never really had health problems or anything as a young person, as a young adult. And when I was in my mid-30s, I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. I had small children. I had a main job and some side jobs, and I was working a lot and sleeping weird hours, and I just wasn't feeling well for a long time. And I remember Angie was visiting me actually, and was I driving to the airport or something? And I had to pull over into a parking lot and throw up. And she's like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I just have to do this every morning, you know." I just feel like I have morning sickness, but I don't. But then I would feel much better and then feel better as the day went on. And because I'm a nurse practitioner, I was trying to take care of myself instead of actually getting proper channels of maybe trying to see what was going on. And I was under a lot of stress. So I thought I was having acid reflux, indigestion, that kind of stuff. And because by the end of the day, I would feel a lot better. And a few months into that, I just started to know there was something wrong with me. And I remember telling people, and I don't know if I told you or just mentioned it to my husband, I thought I had a brain tumor. I was like, I probably need to go get my head scanned or something. But of course, I didn't rush to do that. And the physician that I worked with at the time was always joking, or we were very good friends, but he was always joking like, "Oh, you don't need to go see a neurologist. You need a neuropsychiatrist or something," like I was crazy, right? But it was kind of a joke. But I'm like, a lot of this is maybe it's in my head because I feel fine by the end of the day. Well, I woke up one day, it was Columbus Day, actually, I remember, because my husband was home and he was an elementary school principal at the time. And my kids were at my mother's house because they had the day of school. And I just fell out of bed having vertigo. So my husband happened to be there because I had to holler for him because I couldn't get up because I was so sick. And he took me to the emergency room. And I had worked at a academic teaching institution for most of my life. And I was going to a very small community hospital in the suburb that I was at. And he took me in there and I really felt so unwell. I couldn't very well advocate for myself. And I told the ER doctor that I'd been not feeling good. And I thought maybe I need to have my head scanned. And he kind of blew me off and just said, "If you're not feeling better in a few days, here's a neurologist I want you to go see." And I just accepted it because I would just felt so bad and I just wanted to get out of there. They had given me all these drugs. Nothing was working until finally it did. And so finally I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and I got to call this neurologist and make this appointment. So I call there, and of course, the neurologist wasn't available for 3 or 4 months, but the nurse practitioner was. Of course, I was happy to see that person.
Of course.
And immediately she just said to me, "You didn't have your head scanned like when you were in the emergency room? I can't believe it. You have to go get this done like stat. You have to do it right away." So I did within the week, got my head scanned, and I came off the table and right away the text said, "Come sit over here in this room." Well, I knew exactly what that meant. It validated that I had a brain tumor. It was an emergent situation because the tumor was encroaching on my cerebral artery. So they wanted to admit me, and I didn't want to be admitted there because I didn't want them to have anything to do with whatever was going on there. So I just said, "I've been feeling like this for a so if I feel worse, I'll come to the emergency room. And if not, then I'll come into this appointment on Monday," which was scheduled with the neurosurgeon and neurologist from a much, much bigger regional hospital, more equipped to handle what I had to do. It was exactly where I was supposed to be because I went in for this meeting and the neurosurgeon said that he had just come back to the area. He had been at Loyola and went down to MD Anderson, and all he was working on was brain and spine tumors. Not only that, his mentor was the world expert on the kind of tumor that they thought that I had. They basically said, "We've already cleared the OR for you." So I was like, I need to go home and say goodbye to my kids because they wanted me to come in and have like an airway evaluation and all this stuff that to be prepared to be admitted to have surgery the next day at like 6 a.m. So my husband took me home. First, we stopped. My sister-in-law was also with me, Diana, with me at the appointment, taking notes. Sister-in-law, also one of our best friends from college.
Yes.
And the aunt to my children, obviously. And so we went to have a quick bite to eat because I didn't know when I'd ever be eating again regular food or how that might be because neurosurgery is obviously very complicated, and I knew mine was going to be impacting probably my ability to possibly eat, maybe long term, maybe short term. And then I went home to see my kids, and I was just like, listen, I haven't been feeling well. And I've been waking up and feeling sick in the morning because my older daughter at the time, I think, she was 7 and 4. I was like, there's mom throwing up in the bathroom again this morning. And they just thought it was normal because I just was like, it's no big deal. I'm sure it'll get better. Right. And so she's like, okay. I'm like, I'm going to be in the hospital for a while, but it's okay because dad's going to be here and auntie is going to be here. And, my sister-in-law and I shared the same nanny for years. I'm like, Big Lucy's going to be here. We called her Big Lucy because my niece was Little Lucy. And so that was my younger daughter's only question, like, who's going to take care of us? And I was like, Dad's going to be here. And they're going to be here. And I said goodbye to them, went to the hospital, had the surgery. It was like a 12-hour surgery. Everything went as good as it possibly could. But I was not able to talk and swallow properly as I thought might be the case. That was a big learning experience for me. So that was kind of a shock to go through all that stuff. And I had radiation to the area where I had the brain tumor and had to go to intensive speech therapy, and I was doing better. And I thought, okay, like this is a very rare central nervous system tumor. Not a lot of data on it, but the data that was there was like, hey, if we get this all out in a total resection with radiation, there's an 85% cure rate. So I'm like, oh, I'm good, right? I was like, I got to stop drinking diet pop and, take care of myself more. And so I did. I thought I did. And then in the middle of high COVID, as I like to call it, in 2020, I was still working, seeing patients because I'm a lung specialist. So we were seeing COVID patients. The whole thing was very stressful. I started having back pain, and I thought it was just me having stress pain. And I just knew. I was like, you know what? I'm about to get my head scanned. I better have my neck scanned. And sure enough, I had a disseminated brain tumor, metastases, no tumor in my original spot, but 3 in my spine and a new one in my brain. And I knew there wasn't a whole lot that could be done besides more surgery because I'd already been the chemo and things like that don't really work on this kind of process. It's surgical removal and radiation to the areas. So I went through all that again and had surgery, which went well because it hadn't invaded my spinal cord. Because again, this is a cerebral spinal fluid cancer. So it is only in the brain and spine. It's just up and down all the cells. So their plan was that they had to radiate the entire brain and spine to get all the fluid. So I had gamma knife surgery, which is a focused radiation beam to the area of the one tumor in my brain because I felt like it wasn't obstructing anything, so they didn't have to do it open, which I was happy about. And then I went through another 6 weeks of brain and spine radiation, which is quite a process. And this time I was like, well, obviously didn't do enough to change my life. So I had to do some pretty massive changing because if this doesn't work, then I'm going to die from this. And I wasn't prepared to be leaving 2 smaller children, and I wasn't ready to cave into just conventional treatment either. But my sister-in-law, Diana, who I was talking about before, had a friend who had worked with this shamanic healer named Rodrigo. And she's like, we got to get Amanda in to see Rodrigo. And so I went in for a visit with him. And the first thing he said to me is, he said, tumors come from a lot of dis-ease in the body, and you have to let that stuff go. That's thing number 1, to go through and release all the things that you've been thinking about, your past futures. You got to get a handle on your anxiety by releasing this stuff and learning some different practices. And so I did actually, and Angie came into town, so she was able to come with us, and my other friend, Julie. And I just spent hours sitting outside one day and just, he told me, he's like, you don't have to tell people directly that, like, I'm sorry, forgive me. You can just tell it to the trees and the trees will absorb that. So I did that for hours and had lots of good talking time with all my best friends. And it was a really healing time. And after that is when I went in for my surgery and started my radiation and stuff. And I continued to see Rodrigo, and he worked me through all of this internal stuff that I didn't even realize I was holding on to and festering on. And he really, through various processes of his healing stuff, meditative stuff, I got buried alive, you name it, I did it. I did all these things, and I could feel myself shifting and changing during that time, releasing all the stuff that I used to berate myself for doing or not doing, or, failing to make what I thought was the right choice. And also found some healing responses and some things that I didn't realize were problems necessarily, but they were. And also some things that I knew were problems, like one of my best friends dying after my freshman year in high school very unexpectedly. That wasn't really processed very well, besides, thank goodness, for a wonderful social worker that had a support group for us, all of our friends. But I didn't go to therapy. I didn't do that. My parents didn't do that
Right.
wasn't a thing. That wasn't the kind of a thing that was happening at that time. So, um, anyway, worked through a lot of that stuff, and then really started to be able to listen to myself and start to be more present in the moment and stop living in what he would call is our old stories and worrying about the future, because you can't change that, and found myself being able to live more in the present and just deal with that. And it really changed my whole outlook on life, and my ability to really recognize that I'm very deeply empathic, and lived in a lot of anxiety because I could absorb everybody else's energies, and I didn't really understand why or what that was. But
Right.
my mom used to say, she would see me when I was little, and she would just say, like, her wheels were always turning. And it's true, because there were certain things I could feel that I didn't want to be participating in, didn't want to be a part of, but sort of was forced to have to do it, just like everybody, right? And I didn't know why I felt anxious. I didn't know why I had to hole up in my room and listen to music, sad, deep music. And that was just where I found my comfort at the time. And now I look back and go, oh, I understand now. I was feeling all these energies and I didn't know how to deal with that very well. And now I can see that. And I started to really be able to clearly see energies in people, whether it's their love energy or fear energy, or just their balance of masculine and feminine energies. I learned about all this. I got a whole education, unofficial education, in all of this stuff. And I got myself very interested in that, which is something that I'd like to eventually work on and be able to help other people with. That's how I came to it. So, at present, people tell me I'm a different person, and I believe I see the pictures of myself before all of this, and I physically, my appearance has changed because I lost all my hair, came back in as a pixie, and I never went back to longer hair after that, because everyone would be like, "Oh, your hair looks great. You look so good with short hair." I would have never thought that in a million years.
You did
So that,
not. Yeah.
no, right. So that was thing number one. And then I very slowly was taking care of myself from a fasting. I do intermittent fasting. I've been doing it for 6 years. And I originally started doing that to help with weight loss journey stuff. But then realized as I was learning more about it, it really helped with health issues. And I was already doing that before I had my recurrence. I had just started that before the recurrence of my brain tumor and COVID and all that stuff, which I really think helped me, probably more so than I even knew. But that autophagy is a process where you've been in a state where you've had no food or insulin spikes for so long that your body's able to repair the cellular damage that you have, get rid of the bad cells.
Mm-hmm.
It can't do that when it's always trying to be processing food all day. At least in my case, I felt like that was something that was going to be helping me. And did it ever since that time, and it's very much changed the way my body manages food and how my appearance is.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I had a complete lifestyle change internally and externally over a few years' time. It just kind of slowly progressed that way. So
thank you for kind of opening up all of that personal journey that you had for other people to listen to, because I think there's so much value in sharing our stories. I can attest, as somebody who has seen you through that entire period of time, there is just such a different energy that you carry about yourself at this point in your life that is so different from, like, I think back to Amanda and Angie in our 20s, graduating college, and just like who we were then and how the people that we are today may not necessarily even believe that, like, this is where we are and how different we are. I mean, you've always had very good intuition and a very good, like, inner authority, and been able to be kind of a voice of authority to the friends in your life, and, be a very straight shooter. That is something that has been your hallmark forever. And now you take that and you combine that with the way that you're allowing yourself to feel not just your empathic tendencies, but your intuitive tendencies, and the way that you listen and react and respond when messaging comes to you, even if it's as simple as like, oh, this person is in my thoughts today. Why? I think they need to hear this, or I need to reach out to them. And then you find out that, like, oh, you really did need to reach out to them. They were just thinking about you. Like, you have just really been leaning more into using those authorities that you've always had in a very different way. That is not just advice giving, it is actually like supporting others through their own journeys. And so, of course, I remember a conversation we had at one point where you were kind of connecting the dots about things, the ways that you had been living your life or holding on to things that you really did feel were impacting your health and had really contributed to these tumors manifesting physically for you. And I know that could be triggering for some folks, or some people might feel like it's kind of an unpopular thing to say, that sometimes we cause our own illnesses, things like that. But I know that through your own personal experience, that's something that you would say you experienced.
Yeah.
But I just feel as though cancer taught you so much that obviously maybe it would be nice that it didn't have to be cancer to teach you that. Like, it didn't have to go through that to be taught those lessons. But I feel like I have just seen that be a direct result of what you walked through with your tumors and your journey to get back to health, is that, like, it's been one of the biggest teachers in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a very Christian household community. I never really felt that I jived with that 100%, in the sense of like, there's only this way and this is all, and this experience really shaped that, because I've really learned a different framework for that for myself. And I do feel that I had to go through all of this stuff to be where I'm at. And I have had to go through all these different things to be where we're at, or else we wouldn't be here, right? The mistakes you made being not mistakes, and more like, this is a lesson what did I have to learn about this lesson? And did I learn it, or do I have to keep repeating it until I learn it, right? And that's what I feel I'm taking. That has changed my parameters about stuff, like realizing that when I'm going through something, or if I'm running late, or I miss a train or a plane, I don't worry about it anymore, because I realize it's all these things that we used to worry about, or I used to worry about, really are unimportant altogether. So my whole frame of reference for everything is different than it used to be, and I'm glad for it. And I'm happy to talk to people about it when they ask me, because plenty of people do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go preaching at people unless they're interested to know what I'm doing, or what I have been doing, or learn about my experiences. I've definitely been able to engage in that kind of manner with my own patients that I'm seeing in a more traditional medical sense, which has really made me feel like I might be able to blossom into that more with people. But now I can just read people so well and see what it is that they need. Like if I feel like they need a hug.
Yeah.
You look like you need a hug. Can I give you a hug?
Yeah.
Would you like a hug? Whatever. I always get consent before I go in.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Which I would never have done that before. But also being an example to my own kids and even my husband, who grew up very traditional Christian and was kind of behind me on my path to expansion outside of the Christian framework. And he's really, really expanded his ability to be like, well, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this now because of whatever sequence of events. And right now, he was joking with me before he knew I was coming on to do this podcast. He's like, well, Angie needs to interview me because now I've realized my purpose right now is I have to learn how to work better with women or relate to women or whatever, because he works with all women in our house, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Mm-hmm.
kind of tongue in cheek. But it's really true. He's very much gotten in touch with his emotions, and he didn't used to be that way
Beautiful.
at all. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think that so much of what you're saying, obviously, I know that so much of that has shifted and changed in you due to your experiences of going through what you went through. I also think that so much of this period of time in your life, you're one of my only friends that really has kind of that exact same kind of time frame happening in our lives. So we do talk a bit about this. I feel like not only is there that element of things, but this age and stage that we are going through, both from approaching 50 from like a decade's perspective, but also
Mhm.
our perimenopausal journeys and our parenting journeys and like all of these things, they
Yeah.
do bring us different perspectives in life as well. We learn to not sweat the small stuff quite as much. We learn a lot more about ourselves, and maybe we're apologizing for less things, or maybe we're
Mhm.
giving ourselves permission to do more things. So I would love
Yes.
to hear a little bit from you about some of the things that, in that vein, what you are discovering about yourself, in terms of
Yeah.
the stage and all of those elements as well right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I feel like, changes that are happening with me. Little backstory on that. So I worked in a private practice for many years where I wore lots of hats. I really enjoyed being challenged by coming into a private practice. And I found myself being the first nurse practitioner on medical staff at the hospitals we were rounding on. And that came with a bunch of challenges. And then I started taking on more operations of the practice and being in charge of things to make office flow better, all kinds of things I'd never really experienced before, along with the clinical medicine part. And I liked it, but it was also, I just couldn't divorce myself from the work that had to get done because I felt
Yeah.
like if it wasn't getting done, people were going to suffer and I couldn't be responsible for letting balls drop. So I ended up like really overworking way too much. And finally, at one point, I was like, if I don't leave the stress of this job, I'm going to get sick. I knew it. I could feel
Yeah.
it happening. I knew it. I knew I was not doing well from a mental standpoint. And I ended up, I started at that point, I had been very further along in my spiritual journey. And I said, I manifested it. I said, I need a job that is low stress. It needs to still be in my specialty area because I'm not in a
Mhm.
place where I want to learn something, a new avenue. Um, and I need to be closer to home and I need to make more money. And I'll be damned if that isn't exactly what happened. I would always kind of check the system for the places that were closer to where I lived. And
Mhm.
so that job, I would periodically check and see if there was something available. And I saw they had a job in pulmonary and sleep at the two hospitals that were the closest to me. And I was very on the border about like, should I take this or not? Because I don't think I can work for somebody else telling me what, in a corporate medicine strategy, or I'm used to being in charge. Can I go where I'm not in charge?
Right.
All these things back and forth. And Angie's like, Are you crazy? You just asked the universe for this and you got this. That's not exactly what you said, but it was
Sort of
the
though.
gist of what you said. Um, and my husband said the same thing. And so I accepted the job. But even then, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. But I just had to keep talking myself and be like, trust yourself. This is supposed to be happening. You
Right.
asked for this. This is exactly what you got. So I took the leap and it was one of the hardest things I've done. And it took me a solid 18 months to come off of feeling the high level of stress that I was feeling and used to feeling for so long. And I realized I needed to really reset my nervous
The
system.
nervous system. Yeah.
And I did. And I also feel like, which is a totally different topic, about I had a whole timeline shift. I feel like I hopped into a different version of my life.
You
It didn't
totally
even
did.
feel like my life. And that's part of, I know just my energy and where I'm at now.
Yeah.
But now I'm trying to figure out what my long-term plan is, because I don't necessarily see myself doing this long term.
Hmm.
It's fine. It's fine for now. It's allowed me to be able to start working on my doctorate that I mentioned before. My lack of commute's been great. Now I'm not going to have anybody at home pretty soon. So,
Yep.
what else might I be interested in doing that
Right.
doesn't tether me to this particular area or allows me to explore some of the other areas of energy work and I'm not even sure what to call it all. Like just
Yeah.
experiential spirituality and how can I make that work? Maybe I make that into my own business of some variety or teach other people about it. I don't know. I'm not sure what that
Right.
looks like, but that's kind of on the precipice of what do I want to do next? Because I don't see myself staying in a position like this for the rest of my career, which
Right.
is, I still have plenty of time to work and I want to do it. So I have two girls. I'm extremely close to them, and I have a relationship with them that was always my goal, to have a close relationship with my children, and I have it. And particularly my younger daughter, with both of them, but my older daughter was a little more independent in the sense of didn't necessarily need me to come around and give her a hug. And I'm not that way either, but my younger daughter is. So, and I've spent a lot more time because she was in a travel sport. And so we had to spend a lot of weekends and car rides and things like that to practice and things. So it's a little different. And with my older daughter, she had kind of started to just be out of the house more often, and just kind of naturally when she went to college. At first, I was afraid I was going to be worried about it or missing that interaction. When I dropped her off at school, it was just felt like the right thing, and I felt
Yeah.
happy about it, and she did too. And my husband felt the same way. He was having a lot of trepidation about it, and then found out oh no, actually this felt really good. And now we're going to be dealing with that for my next one. And now I'm like, what happens when I'm already feeling the change of we don't have volleyball to go to. We don't have this to do. We don't have that to do. We shifted a lot of our weekend plans and even groups of people that we used
Yeah.
to hang out with that we don't. So and some of that has been intentional and some of it hasn't been. Part of me is after I went through all this, I realized I really recharged by being alone or only with people that I really want to be with. I have to make small talk all day, and that's not
Yeah.
really what I like to do. Um, but I have to do it, right? But it takes a lot out of me. So I've learned that I can say no to things, and I definitely feel like going through the health stuff allowed me to be able to say no, whether it was volunteering or participating in something that I really had no interest in, but felt like I should. I don't feel like that anymore about anything.
Yeah. You're really giving yourself permission to just
Oh, yeah.
be honest and say the thing. Say the thing, even
Mhm.
if it's, somebody's not going to like what they're getting in response, if it's a no or.
Yeah, or just this relationship or this dynamic doesn't really serve me anymore, and it's nothing on you, or it's nothing between us, nothing wrong happened. It's just time to be done
Yeah.
with whatever that was, whether it was a dynamic of a group or couples or whatever it is. And sometimes that feels really good. And other times it feels kind of lonely. Like I was driving back from my parents and I had seen some old, very, very dear friends. And I just was having a lot of sadness. Like you can't make a new old best friends. That's what it is. My husband had used that phrase before. And it's so true. You can't make new old best friends because people don't know you in that capacity, even though you can have new wonderful friends, right? There's just something familiar about that. And so I was feeling a lot of sadness about that as I was driving home. And because that's also part of the things where it's like, where do I want to land? I don't know that I need to stay where I'm at right now. It's been a wonderful place to raise my kids, and be, and have had great friends and it's a wonderful area, but that, is that what's for me still long term? And my husband and I have been talking about it because at first he's like, oh no, we're gonna retire here. This is what we're gonna do, and maybe we'll go out some other places when it's cold. And I'm like, no, I'm not sure that I'm feeling that. So it's those kind of discussions and decisions.
Yeah, it feels like those are the ones that are kind of taking up our airspace when we're on the phone these days too. We're talking a lot about, friendship adjustments and changes and what does serve us now and living situations and who are we when we aren't needed in the same way that we were needed before with our kids at home or in our careers or in whatever ways. And so I think that is a whole topic we can save maybe for the next visit on the show because there's a lot there. There is a lot there for many women going through this age and this stage of life and thinking through what can version 2.0 of our life look like when we get to this place where,
2.0
that part
5.0.
maybe 5.0 actually. It's definitely more than 2. You're absolutely right. And so, yeah, I think that is exactly the point of where we're at in the journey right now. And it's something that uniquely you and me, at least in our friendship, are going through together, which is so nice to have another person that is in that same place and can relate because as you said, it can be a very lonely feeling to go through this period of transition. And a huge reason that I am putting time and energy into what she said is because this is what I would like to be spending my time on moving forward, right? I have all of this free time in my life now too. So what wants to come forward? What wants to be here? What wants to be built? What wants to be dove into by me? And I think this is something I don't know all the answers of it, but I do know that these conversations are really important to me. And I'm just really grateful that you would take the time to come on today. I'm just really glad that we could connect in and have this at least initial conversation. You will be back, and I can't wait to talk about so much more with you. Thanks for listening. If today's conversation stayed with you, share it with someone you love or leave us a review. And if it sparked a story of your own, I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you next time on What She Said.